So, yeah, so the way I'm doing this is every month of the year, the most popular song worldwide every month. And I'm going to talk about the song and briefly talk about the video as well. So, in January of 1990, coming into the 90s, we have Phil Collins' Another Day in Paradise. Don't know if you remember the video to this, Helen.
I'm not sure if I remember the video. Obviously, I do know the song very well, and I do think it's a goodie. What happens in the video?
Well, we're in the period of videos now where videos have just started picking up. So a lot of the videos are very avant-garde, very either take the song and take it literally or have a weird take on it. And this one is kind of a weird take on it, I think. Kind of literal. It's basically like a homeless person in the streets, I think. The most
Yeah,
of the
that's
video, and
ringing a bell now.
sort of filmed in a very weird way. Yeah, and it's just quite melodic. I quite like it. It's it's a middling Phil Collins song. I did like quite a lot of his songs. He was a little bit too poppy for my liking
Mm.
sometimes, but he was a pretty good artist coming out of the 80s into the 90s. He had quite a good run in the 90s and obviously Genesis
Well,
in
I was
the
going to
80s.
say, so this was like the most popular song in January of 1990. Is this because of Genesis that he's so popular, or is this just the
Well, he
song?
was a drummer in Genesis originally, and then he became the lead singer when Peter Gabriel left, which is not a usual situation. But yeah, I think Genesis gave him a bit of a boost.
Like a platform?
A lot of people could say, at least as far as pop hits goes, he was a lot more successful than Genesis, which isn't always the case.
Mm.
What normally happens is one of these bands when they split up or whatever, it's usually one person gets a proper shot at having a solo career. It's rarely more than one. In this case, Peter Gabriel had a good shot at a solo career as well, but he left a lot earlier than Phil Collins.
Of all
So
the songs to start off 1990 with, that was a pretty good one. Like in terms of it being popular, it suggests that people of the 90s are going to have relatively good taste in music.
yeah, I mean, the more I've looked at this list, like initially I was kind of like, it's better after 1990, but I don't know. Some of these songs are quite good, solid songs.
I had to pick a best and worst song. It wasn't difficult to pick the worst song, but it was difficult to pick the best song because I actually think, in terms of pop music and dance music, 1990 has some absolute gems in it.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's
I know
very
as
much
we run through the months, we're going to hear sort of a mix of different music styles. But I
yeah.
do think, particularly in terms of pop and dance, 1990 was a solid year. It really was.
I think it's a good one to start the decade off, good one to start the year because it is one of them. You do think Phil Collins 80s, but there's sort of hints of what's to come in the 90s there as well. So
Well, that's
that's a
the
good
thing
one.
that my late husband was always talking about, was that decades don't just happen at the stroke of midnight
Magically,
on 1990. And of course, a lot of people would say that the decade didn't really start till 91 anyway. But the thing is that, anything like Pretty Woman, which was released in 1990, it's all very 80s. And that's because,
yeah,
we are still really sort of having a hangover from the last decade
yeah.
whenever we start a new one. We don't always move on just because time has. So I think that's,
It's very much apparent in a lot of these
the fact
songs.
that the first like pop, like chart topper in January is from somebody who was big in the 80s is testament to the fact that people's heads are still kind of in the 80s, even though 1990 has begun. So yeah, I think that's really cool.
Right, so